Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Now, in my Classical Music's 10 Dirtiest Secrets video, I mentioned as one of them that Liszt is trash. Of course, that's a controversial point of view, but unfortunately, it's less controversial possibly than it should be, because a lot of Liszt, of course, is not trash. He was a major composer who had a tremendous influence on later music. And I think perhaps the trash epithet applies most obviously to his orchestral works. You know, we used to joke, I've played a bunch of them, that everything Liszt wrote sounds like a trombone. Even his string writing sounds like a trombone. And now we kind of know why. Because in the Weimar Orchestra, as it turns out, Liszt had a teeny tiny string section. Only 5 or 6 first violins, 5 or 6 seconds, 3 violas, a couple of cellos, a couple of basses, and with that, it was a theater orchestra. He played the premiere of Wagner's Lohengrin. Can you imagine such a thing? And his own symphonic poems, which were written for very full woodwind and brass sections with lots of unusual instruments, English horns and bass clarinets and large percussion sections and double timpani and teeny tiny strings. It's no wonder that it sounds kind of screechy in places. There's really not a heck of a lot you can do about it, is there? The fact of the matter is, however, that Liszt tone poems contain a lot of good music. The problem is that nobody takes the time to listen to all of them. It's hard to say exactly. Of the numbered tone poems, there are about 13. But there's a lot of other orchestral music that you would classify as a symphonic poem, and it's well worth hearing. It really is. Some of the stuff is fascinating. They're mostly orchestrations of piano works. Liszt was one of those composers. He was kind of like Stravinsky. He was more interesting for the ideas he had than for being able to come up with original melodic or thematic material. He borrowed a lot. He reused a lot. He used other people's sometimes. That's why his piano transcriptions are so wonderful, and his transcriptions of Beethoven's symphonies. He might have been happiest when he could arrange other people's music, but give it the treatment, as Stravinsky did. The difference, of course, is that Stravinsky was able to realize all of his ideas, whereas Liszt perhaps wasn't so good at that. He had them. They were incredibly original. He had an amazing conception of orchestral sonority. His use of brass and percussion and woodwind instruments was really revolutionary in the 1850s and 60s. He was doing things that nobody else was doing. It was very futuristic and modernistic for the time. And even today, it's extremely effective in spots. What Liszt lacked, I think, was a sense of musical timing, like lots of composers. Richard Strauss had a very bad sense of musical timing. How to know when to end, how to shape an effective piece so that it has a natural flow and a sort of organic feeling of cohesion. The abstract idea of the symphonic poem, of taking a couple of themes, one or two, and transforming them through various sections in a single movement, sounds lovely on paper. It really does. But you still have to bring to bear all of the other, rhythmic, tonal, harmonic, and general musical qualities in creating a cohesive work of art. And that Liszt wasn't so good at. One of my favorites of the tone poems is Ce qu'on entend sur la montagne, what one hears on the mountain. In German, it's called the Bergsymphonie, the Mountain Symphony. This sucker is half an hour long, right? And Donald Tovey, the great English writer on music, described it as an introduction to a connecting link to a series of more introductory episodes introducing a central theme and then a recapitulation of all of the other introductions. And he's right. It doesn't go anywhere, but the atmosphere, it just sounds great. It has luscious episodes and flecks of brooding orchestration, and it very well could have been the influence for Sibelius's Ansaga, because it sounds an awful lot like that in places, including those endless bass drum rolls, and there's also splashy passages for the harp and whatnot. It's lovely, lovely music in these Liszt tone poems. There's all kinds of fun stuff happening. But are they satisfying? When they come to an end, if they ever come to an end, do you feel fulfilled? Do they even start? I mean, it's really kind of hard to say sometimes. It depends on the individual work. It also depends on the persuasiveness of the performance. A lot of them have very pretentious philosophical programs, like the most popular of all, Les Préludes. Life is but a prelude to God knows what. That's one of his more successful tone poems. Why? Because it doesn't matter what life is a prelude to, and it doesn't matter what the music does. He can focus on the musical element at the expense of the programmatic. On the other hand, one of the most derided is Hunnenschlacht. I love the title, The Slaughter of the Huns. I mean, this is basically a battle between two themes, a Gregorian chant, Crux Fidelis, and some Hunnenschlacht music, the Schlacht music. And it actually works very well. I mean, the two things kind of alternate. Then at the end, the organ comes chiming in with the Gregorian theme at the end, and it rises to this big, brilliant climax. I think it works wonderfully. I really do. I mean, some of these things, you'd be surprised. You have to listen to them. I mean, Mazeppa, that became, that's sort of an orchestration of one of the transcendental etudes. That one works pretty well. Hamlet's lovely. Orpheus, it has harps. It's got Orpheus. It's got lots of harps. I mean, Liszt knew what he was doing. He really did. But, you have to decide whether you like the result. But let's talk about some recordings and see where we wind up. I also want to talk about some of the pieces that really are symphonic poems, but that are not part of the canonic 13. There were 12 written in a group, sort of in a bunch in Weimar, and then one later one called From the Cradle to the Grave. That's also a wonderful tone poem. I love that piece. It's in 3 movements. It does exactly what it says it does. It has the cradle, it has the struggle of life, and then it has death. It's totally, completely clear in its programmatic intent, and Liszt realizes it beautifully in the battle music. The central section sounds an awful lot like Sibelius. I mean, one of the fascinating things about these things is how Liszt was able to anticipate later composers. And of course, Sibelius especially got a lot out of Liszt. He admitted it. He said he was a symphonic poem composer of the Lisztian mold. And he knew his Liszt a lot better than we did, I might add, especially through his friendship with Busoni, who was living in Finland as well. So there are echoes of later composers. I mean, it's very, very original music. It just has its dysfunctional aspects, and we have to get past them. A lot of them can be patched up if the performance is effective enough. So let's talk about those performances. I have here 4 boxes of Liszt tone poems. The first and least is Bernard Haitink with the London Philharmonic. Unfortunately, this is not Haitink's best work, not by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Haitink really could be a tremendous advocate for music that people considered second-rate, like Shostakovich's 12th Symphony and things like that. He could do a fantastic job with it. But here, I think the music defeats him. I think he just doesn't have that, sense of sort of let it all hang out, sense of fun, the healthy vulgarity that this music it's a part of the music, and you have to realize it. One of the things that Haitink always does is play very, very beautifully. There are moments, especially in the quieter tone poems like Hamlet and Orpheus, where you really do feel that he's making a lot out of not such promising material sometimes. I mean, he can get it. He has a very keen ear for texture. The performances are nicely recorded, but at the end of the day, when we all have to make a decision, they're just boring. I mean, they're simply dull. And it's a pity. It's a pity, because had this cycle been better than it is, it really could have changed our whole view of Liszt tone poems, because this was the cycle that got all the distribution. It was on Philips at the time. Now it's on Decca. It was a major label. It got a lot of attention. It was in London, where all the British critics were ready to jump all over it and drool and pant and heave and tell us how fabulous it was. But it wasn't fabulous. So, sorry, Bernard. It wasn't your best day. The rest of these are all better and really excellent in their various ways. They really are. And if you give them the attention that they deserve, I think you'll agree. This is going to be hard to find, probably. This was the late conductor Arpad Jo from Hungary with the Budapest Symphony. It was on Hungariton, a 5-disc set. It includes the second Mephisto Waltz and the 2 episodes from Leno's Faust, which are actually Mephisto Waltz number 1, right, from Leno's Faust, and the Nachtlicher Zug, the Nocturnal Procession, which nobody ever plays, but which is a very, very atmospheric and beautiful work. It's really quite wonderful, and the 2 pieces really ought to be played together, as they are here and in most of these other sets of the symphonic poems. I don't know why this duo, this 2-part set, doesn't get played more often as Liszt wrote it, because it works. It works really, really well, simply because you have 2 independent works with nice contrast between them, so you don't have to worry about so much the internal coherence of each one individually. When you put them together, you have a lovely balance, really, really effective balance of contrast and pacing. But they're beautiful works. This was a very, very exciting set. It's well played. It was dynamic and virile, and it had all of that sort of excitement and energy that Haitink was lacking. But unfortunately, this seems to be out of print. I've seen it on Amazon for lots of money. It was issued also as a budget thing. I don't know if it was Brilliant Classics or some other label, but it was available. It may be in some other box somewhere. I don't know. I truly don't know. I was researching it before I did this video. Maybe some of you will find these things on a streaming service, or, because you're much better at that than I am. I don't really know what those have, and you guys do. So if you do find these performances with Arpad Jo, please chime in the comments and let people know where they are. However, you do not need to limit yourself to that. One of the big surprises, and this is still out, and it's recently been reissued by Warner from EMI, is Kurt Masur with the Gewandhaus. Now, Masur, as you know, is nobody's idea of a thriller as a conductor, but this may be one of the best things he ever did. Really, these are terrific performances. They have a natural sort of, Masur doesn't get in the way of the music's, crazier, sort of more annoying tendencies, but he keeps it flowing. He has a great orchestra at his disposal with a wonderful timbre of its own. I mean, the Gewandhaus, especially in its good old East German days, had a very Berlin Philharmonic Carillon type sound. It was one of those unblended Czech fill kind of sounds. And that works wonderfully well in this music, because you don't have to be vulgar and noisy, but still allow everything to be transparent and cleanly heard and played effectively. And you also get, this set has a lot of stuff in it. Let me tell you what's in it so that you know. I have the booklets here. The Weimar Symphonic Poems. Well, you also get the Mephisto Waltz number 2, and you get all the major symphonic poems, and you get the Faust and the Dante symphonies in very, very good performances, by the way. I mean, some of the best ones still these days. Plus, and this is really, really good, you get the 2 episodes from Leno's Faust, of course, the Mephisto Waltz number 1 and the Nocturnal Procession, and all the major works for piano and orchestra, very, very well played by Michel Berhoff. And that's really a considerable bonus. So, this box is definitely worth having if you're looking for a very good set of Liszt's orchestral music. However, there is a new entry that's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, both for its completeness and for how it's played. And that's this set on Gramola. Now, Gramola is a label that has earned my eternal disparagement for releasing the Bruckner symphonies with Remy Ballot or however you pronounce him, the guy who's trying to out Celibidache by having a lousy orchestra play all of the Bruckner symphonies at even slower tempos than Celibidache would ever dare. They're the most horrible performances coming out, aside from Mario Vensago's Bruckner on CPO, which is horrible in the other direction. Fast, light, stupid, never mind. We're not talking about Bruckner. However, they do have the Wiener Academy here, Academia under Martin Haselböck. Now, Haselbock, how do you pronounce this name? Haselbock. Haselbock, that's it. Martin Haselböck is a wonderful conductor, generally. He's done all kinds of good period instrument stuff. I really like him. He doesn't have, the cachet of some of the other period instrument folks, but I've heard he did lots of Haydn with the Wiener Academy. It's on BIS now, some of that stuff. It's really good. I mean, most of his stuff is just really musically decent. And his Liszt is pretty extraordinary. This is the authentic sound of Weimar, which of course is bull. We all know it's bull. But never mind. He even uses a larger string section than Liszt had because you have to. Liszt could not have been satisfied with the number of strings in that orchestra. He was always complaining, like all these people always were. And, that he wanted more players, more strings. He particularly wanted more brass and percussion and woodwinds, but he also needed more strings desperately. And so this is a 9-disc set. And I really want to tell you, aside from the canonical 13 symphonic poems, and the 2 symphonies, the Faust and the Dantes, and all the Mephisto stuff, you get, their last 3 discs are wonderful because you get things that you won't find anywhere else. And this is all music that's been published that we knew existed, that just people never recorded or played. You get Schubert transcriptions, 3 of them, 2 funeral marches and a Hungarian march. And then, of course, you get the Wanderer Fantasy on a forte piano, which is quite wonderful. And then you've got, of course, the Mephisto stuff. I think I mentioned that. But you also get Les Morts, Horizon pour large orchestra, The Dead. Ooh, that's late Liszt. It's wonderful. Then you get Night, Die Nacht, which is also quite wonderful. And you get the Wechsel Regis, which is and the Kreuzes hymn, which is really an odd little thing. That's a world premiere recording that Liszt orchestrated. Then you get, I think this is just wonderful, wonderful stuff here. The 2 legends, the 2 piano legends of St. Francis of Assisi's Sermon to the Birds. Remember that? That's an interminable piano piece that he turns into an absolutely even more interminable orchestral work. That's actually only 10 minutes long. It seems a lot longer because the birds are twittering endlessly, But it's fascinating to hear the orchestration if you know the piano work, as most of us, of course, do. And then, of course, St. Francis de Paul's Walking on the Waves, which is a beautiful opportunity for Liszt to indulge in some of his best watery orchestration. Then you get the Hungarian Rhapsodies, the 6 Hungarian Rhapsodies. These are really fine performances. And one of the things we hear with the authentic instruments is that the brass, that harsh, nasty sort of brass writing that some of us hear when we hear Liszt symphonic poems is tamed to a considerable degree. Now, there are places like at the beginning of the Dante Symphony where you really don't want to have it tamed. You want to have the brass just blasting it out at you and driving you crazy. The whole sound is softer and more rounded than we're used to. But with a small string section, that's arguably appropriate. I think that the sonic frame of these performances is excellent, but the performances themselves are excellent. They're well-paced, they're smart. He doesn't stint on the woodwind coloration and the percussion and all the other stuff. I mean, it's all there. It's all there, but the proportions are a little different. And I think that makes the music really, really worth hearing. So if you can get this set with Martin Haselböck on Gramola, I really recommend it. I was totally surprised, and it took me completely, unprepared because I had no idea what to expect. I thought Liszt on period instruments would be a disaster, and that the whole sound would be terrible, and they would be even less effective than they are normally. But the precise opposite was the case. I found it really, really worthwhile to hear these pieces played this way, taken with that kind of seriousness and care, which just goes to show, of course, that, as Mahler once said, there are no bad orchestras, only bad conductors, and maybe there's, no crappy music, only crappy performances of it. Well, that's not true. There is crappy music. But, you can make these pieces work. They take a little bit of special pleading. and I think a little extra hard work on the part of the players. But I get a sense that in this set, that's exactly what happens. So if you can't find Arpad Jo, I would definitely, you should definitely have the Masur set, because they're the best performances on a modern orchestra that are out there, and you get all the music for piano and orchestra, which is terrific. But this set of world premieres and other works that you can't get anywhere else, in addition to the canonic symphonic poems, all really lovingly presented on authentic instruments, is one of the great period instrument discoveries of the Romantic period. Let me put it to you that way. I mean, it's just another reason that I was so happy that I did as I always exhort you to do, which is keep on listening. There's a lot of good music in here that you may not know or have heard before, or that you won't expect. So here's some real discoveries by a major composer. I mean, that's always exciting, isn't it? Thank you. And if you enjoyed this chat, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Take care.